course itself, Bob Gordon maintains his lead overall in the four-wheel divisions. Gary Pace rides with Gordon. The run courses its way out of Ensenada. Gordon is currently at Ojos Negros. The course is the same for the motorcycles and the four-wheelers. The terrain switches from mud to dust to sand, up across the Sierra Juarez Mountains, down through the washes and the dry lakes, into San Felipe, and then back west, across the Baja Peninsula. In the darkness, they run along the Pacific, and finally back into Ensenada.
Bob Gordon, who won this race in 1980, heading east from Ojos Negros, which in Spanish means black eyes. There are puddles in the sandy road, and Gordon, dodging them, is pushing hard. I always felt a flash of elation out here. The car in its element, running 100, 110 sometimes. The chill of dawn in Ensenada behind you. The sun, up now, warming you.
On board with Frank Vessels and Jack Arute, already passing vehicles that left in front of them.
Frank keeps one hand on the wheel. With the other, he shifts the two speeds of his manually operated automatic. A muddy road, something rare for this part of the course, but remember, it's been raining out here this week.
The challenge of the Baja is not only of distance and terrain, but of altitude. They begin at sea level and climb to over 8,000 feet as the engines strain, and then back to sea level again, crisscrossing the mountains. Bob Gordon nears the summit.
Bob Gordon, his radio broken, must rely on hearsay information. At the last checkpoint, he has been told he has a 4-minute lead. And here, threading his way between the jutting granite rocks which can easily slice the sidewall of a tire, he is careful, willing to sacrifice some of the lead to avoid a flat. He worries about his oil temperature, which is running hot.
Frank Vessels approaches the summit. He's closing on the lead.
Vessels has passed 14 buggies and trucks that started ahead of him. He is third on the course and driving the sort of race you drive maybe once a year, where everything feels effortless, where your pace seems slow but your times are fast, and your monster truck, 5,000 pounds, 600 horsepower, dances over the terrain as lightly as Bob Gordon's buggy, which was half the weight and a third the horsepower.
Vessel's understanding of the Baja is extensive. So what is his strategy? What is his approach?
Well, it's the Baja 1000. You know, we're in these cars for 16, 17 hours, hopefully, maybe 20. I think year before last it took me 23 hours, and it's an adventure. It's a man against the elements, especially now with all the rain. You don't know what's around the corner. And it's the idea that I can tackle that race course faster than anybody else, hopefully, or at least the people in my class.
For this leg of the race, Jack Arute has been replaced by Frank's mechanic, Bill Anderhall. A co-driver watches his man carefully, especially when, like Frank, it's someone who plans to drive the entire distance without relief. The conversation is difficult and distracting, but Bill can tell that Frank looks good, and he's found his rhythm.
Frank Vessels runs in third place, closing on the leaders. Out in front still is Bob Gordon, now 2.5 hours down the course. But just behind Gordon is David Chrysler, now closing on the leader, and like Frank Vessels, intends to run the entire route without relief. He drives a vehicle of his own design. The sun burns down on the Baja now. Temperatures rise into the 90s as Bob Gordon is 130 miles out, approaching Cohabuso Junction.
Gordon has asked his passenger Gary Pace to check for cars behind, but Pace fails to spot Chrysler, whose low-slung buggy is hidden by the bushes. Gordon pours it on, aware that at his next refueling stop, he will turn the car over to his co-driver, Malcolm Smith. He will have been at the wheel for 3 hours. This is what it is like at speed aboard the car of Bob Gordon. A violent, battering, up and down motion like a speedboat crashing through waves. The ride seems unreal because you know the car can't absorb this, and yet somehow it does. The oil temperature had risen to the critical point, and Gordon and Pace, without losing speed, have managed to remove the windshield in order to improve airflow to the engine. Within 2 miles, the temperature has dropped to normal.
But Bob Gordon is unaware that just behind and closing in now is David Chrysler. Chrysler is a familiar rival to Gordon. They both race this 10-race season of off-road. But does the Baja truly compare with the other events?
No, the Baja is my #1 race. I love it down here. It's just, you have all types of conditions here. You're going to have the Gulf side with possibly it could be 80, 90 degrees on the Gulf side, rain, and then rain on the Pacific side. It's just no other where else can you race and come up with those conditions.
Is there any sense of kind of man struggling against nature down here in your mind, or do you see it just as man against man?
I see it as man against man down here. That's the way I attack the race.
It's high noon on the Baja. On the fastest part of the race course, Bob Gordon still leads. Just ahead lies the checkpoint at Tres Pozos, the 3 mines. Here, the officials will take down the car number and note the time of arrival so they can score the race properly. Gordon's pit crew has leapfrogged ahead to this point and waits for a regularly scheduled stop for Gordon just a few hundred yards beyond the checkpoint itself.
Gordon is ahead of schedule, and his relief driver, Malcolm Smith, who had hoped to be signaled of Gordon's approach by a ham radio operator, isn't ready. What should have been a 90-second stop drags on.
David Chrysler is not scheduled to stop. He roars past the machine as they are changing drivers between Gordon and Smith. David Chrysler now has the lead.
Chrysler is ebullient and feels like the Iron Man, proud of his toughness, his decision to drive the entire way without relief. It has handed him a tangible advantage.
Behind Chrysler at Tres Pozos, Malcolm Smith finally pulls away and begins his pursuit.
Smith, shaken by the delay and aware that he has lost the lead, streaks after Chrysler.
But then suddenly Chrysler begins to slow down. He's had no warning of any problem at all. Like a wounded animal, Chrysler's machine goes lame and pulls up beside the road. Malcolm Smith, now replacing Bob Gordon at the wheel, can see his quarry ahead and roars past, back into the lead. David Chrysler climbs out to check his now blown engine. For Dave Chrysler and Curly Nobles, this Baja 1000 is over. Malcolm Smith now has the lead in hand.
In dreams I can fly.